Chapter 30, Regeneration. In this chapter we can but briefly direct your attention to a subject of vital importance to the race, but which the race generally is not ready to seriously consider. Owing to the present state of public opinion upon this subject, it is impossible to write as plainly as one would like, or as is really necessary, and all writings upon the subject in question are apt to be considered as impure, although the only object of the writer may be to counteract the impurity and improper practices indulged by the public. However, some brave writers have managed to give the public a very fair acquaintance with the subject of regeneration, so that the majority of our readers will readily understand what we mean. We will not take up the important subject of the use of regeneration as applied to the relation of the two sexes, as that subject is so important as to require volume by itself, and then, besides, this work is scarcely the one in which this subject should be discussed in detail. We will, however, say a few words on the subject. The yogis regard as wholly unnatural the excesses entered into by the majority of men, and into which they compel their partners in matrimony to join. They believe that the sex principle is too sacred to be so abused, and feel that man often descends below the level of the brute in his sex relations. With but one or two exceptions, the lower animals have sexual relations only for the purpose of perpetuating their kind, and sexual excesses, drains and ways such as man indulges in is almost entirely unknown to the lower animal. As man has advanced in the scale of life, however, he has brought to light new functions of sex, and there is an interchange of certain higher principles between the sexes, which does not occur to the brutes or to the more material forms of human life. This is reserved for the man and woman of developed mentality and spirituality. Proper relations between husband and wife tend to elevate, strengthen, and ennoble, instead of degrading, weakening and defiling the participants, as is the case when the said relation is based upon mere sensuality. This is the reason that there is so much marital inharmony and discord when one of the partners rises to a higher plane of thought, and finds that his or her partner is unable to follow. Thereafter their mutual relations are upon different planes, and they fail to find in each other that which they might wish for. This is all we wish to say upon this particular part of the subject here. There are a number of good books upon the subject, that our students may find by inquiring at the Centers for Advanced Thought Literature in the different cities and towns. We will confine ourselves in the remainder of this short chapter to the discussion of the subject of the importance of preserving sexual strength and health, while leading a life in which the actual relations of the sexes does not play an important part. The yogis recognize and appreciate the importance of healthy reproductive organism, and their effect upon the general health of the individual. With these organs in a weakened condition, the entire physical system feels the reflex action and suffers sympathetically. The complete breath, described elsewhere in this book, produces a rhythm which is nature's own plan for keeping this important part of the system in normal condition, and, from the first, it will be noticed that the reproductive functions are strengthened and vitalized, thus, by sympathetic reflex action, giving tone to the whole system. By this we do not mean that the animal passions will be aroused, far from it. The yogis are advocates of continence and chastity, and purity in the marriage relation as well as out of it. They have learned to control the animal passions, and to hold them subject to the control of the higher principles of the mind and will. But sexual control does not mean sexual weakness, and the yogi teachings are that the man or woman whose reproductive organism is normal and healthy will have a stronger will with which to control himself or herself. The yogi believes that much of the perversion of this wonderful part of the system comes from a lack of normal health and results from a morbid rather than from a normal condition of the reproductive system. The yogis also know that the sex energy may be conserved and used for the development of the body and mind of the individual, instead of being dissipated in unnatural excesses as is the wont of so many uninformed people. We give in the following pages, one of the favorite yogi exercises for producing this result. Whether or not the student wishes to follow the yogi theories of clean living, he will find that the complete breath will do more to restore health to this part of the system than anything else ever tried. Remember, now, we mean normal health, not undue development. The sensualist will find that normal means a lessening of desire rather than an increase. The weakened man or woman will find that normal means a toning up and relief from the weakness which has heretofore depressed him or her. We do not wish to be misunderstood on this subject. The yogi's ideal is a body strong in all its parts, and under the control of a masterful and developed will, animated by high ideals. The yogis possess great knowledge regarding the use and abuse of the reproductive principle in both sexes. Some hints of this esoteric teaching have filtered out, and have been used by Western writers on the subject, and much good thereby accomplished. In this book we cannot go into a discussion of the underlying theory, but will call your attention to a method whereby the student may be enabled to transmute the reproductive energy into vitality for the whole system instead of wasting it and dissipating it in lustful indulgences. The reproductive energy is creative energy, and may be taken up by the system and transmuted into strength and vitality, thus serving the purpose of regeneration instead of generation. If the young men of the Western world understood these underlying principles, they would be saved much misery and unhappiness in after years, and would be stronger mentally, morally and physically. This transmutation of the reproductive energy gives great vitality to those practicing it. It fills them with great vital force, which will radiate from them and cause them to be known as magnetic personalities. The energy thus transmuted may be turned into new channels and used to great advantage. Nature has condensed one of its most powerful manifestations of prana into reproductive energy, as its purpose is to create. The greatest amount of vital force is concentrated into the smallest space. The reproductive organism is the most powerful storage battery in animal life, and its force may be drawn upward and used, as well as expended in the ordinary functions of reproduction, or wasted in riotous lust. The yogi exercise for transmuting reproductive energy is simple. It is coupled with rhythmic breathing and is easily performed. It may be practiced at any time, but is strongly recommended when one feels the instinct most strongly, at which time the reproductive energy is manifesting and may be easily transmuted for regenerative purposes. We give it in the next paragraph. The men or women doing mental creative work, or bodily creative work, will be able to use this creative energy in their vocations, by following the exercise, drawing up the energy with each inhalation and sending it forth with the exhalation. The student will understand, of course, that it is not the actual reproductive fluids that are drawn up and used, but the etheric pranic energy which animates the latter, the soul of the reproductive organism, as it were. Regenerative exercise. Keep the mind fixed on the idea of energy, and away from ordinary sexual thoughts or imaginings. If these thoughts come into the mind, do not feel discouraged, but regard them as manifestations of a force which you intend to use for the purpose of strengthening your body and mind. Lie passively, or sit erect, and fix your mind upon the idea of drawing the reproductive energy upward to the solar plexus, where it will be transmuted and stored away as a reserve force of vital energy. Then breathe rhythmically, forming the mental image of drawing up the reproductive energy with each inhalation. With each inhalation make a command of the will that the energy be drawn upward from the reproductive organism to the solar plexus. If the rhythm is fairly established and the mental image is clear, you will be conscious of the upward passage of the energy, and will feel its stimulating effect. If you desire an increase in mental force, you may draw it up to the brain instead of to the solar plexus, by giving the mental command and holding the mental image of the transmission to the brain. In this last form of the exercise, only such portions of the energy as may be needed in the mental work being done will pass into the brain, the balance remaining stored up in the solar plexus. It is usual to allow the head to bend forward easily and naturally during the transmuting exercise. This subject of regeneration opens up a wide field for investigation, research and study, and someday we may find it advisable to issue a little manual upon the subject, for private circulation among the few who are ready for it, and who seek the knowledge from the purest motives, rather than from a desire to find something which will appeal to their lascivious imaginations and inclinations.